This video is entitled The Data Flow Diagram Level 0 and is a companion piece to Chapter 5 in our Systems Analysis and Design course. I'm Dr. Renaud from Shawnee State University, and I'll be taking you through this video presentation on the Level 0 diagram. So a Level 0 diagram is adding more information to the context diagram. So we're going to start with the context diagram, and what I suggest you do is you take all of the sources and sinks, you take all of the entities you've defined on the context diagram and their data flows and put them on a new blank document. In other words, just delete the system in the middle. Then identify 5 to 8, maybe a few more, maybe a few less, but typically it's somewhere in the range of a little less than 10 of the big processes that that deal with all the data flows from the context diagram. We'll then add those big processes. We'll then add additional data flows that are necessary between processes. And then we'll add data stores and data flows to represent where we're storing data. And this kind of now becomes a framework then that will let us create our level 1 diagram, where we take each of those processes on the level 0 diagram and blow them up into a lot more detail as we try to figure out again all the data flows. Now, these big processes aren't just your best guess kind of things, even though in the homework assignments you don't really have the customer detail. But in a real world situation, you're going to have a lot of information from your user, from the client, and these processes will come out of the problem description and come out of your analysis. So an example that we had in our last presentation was the repair order system, where we had a repair order with service techs and managers and customers and accounts receivable system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this repair order system and basically I'm going to delete the process in the middle, and I'm going to create the processes that make up the big processes that make up the whole system. Now, because that's going to be a very complex diagram, I'm just going to take a little fragment here. The manager that puts a job into the system, that requests report information from the system and then gets reports from the system. That's what a manager does, right? At least in the context diagram. Well, wouldn't that be two separate big processes? The add a new job process and the generate reports process or management reporting process. Wouldn't those be two nice processes that describe the 3 data flows and take care of the 3 data flows? Then we look at what data store, what storage do we need, what kind of things are we storing here? And just very simply, I can see that, well, we get job information from the manager, add the job to something. We need to store the job in a data store, don't we? And so I created a data store called jobs. Why not? It's a good name for it. It's descriptive, lets you know what you're putting in that data store. Then look at management reporting. Well, management reporting is going to query jobs and get back data about jobs to generate the reports that the managers get. Hey, so we take that fragment and then we do the fragment for the customer, and then we do the fragment for the service tech, and then we do the fragment for the accounts receivable system, and then we put all of those fragments together into one big complex document. And we come up with a level 0 diagram that might look like this. Now, your mileage may vary. Your processes may be different. You might have read the problem differently than me. You might have gone through and broken some of might have looked at some data stores. For instance, there's no customer data store. There probably should be a customer data store to save customer name, address, phone number. There's no service tech data store to save the information about a service tech. There's no process to maintain those kind of data stores. So is this context diagram missing a whole bunch of stuff? Yeah, it is, but let's take a look. A manager creates a new job, and you can see that it goes to the add a job, and then that job data goes along here over into the jobs data store there in the middle. Notice that add a job also sends a data flow up to a process that breaks a job into its various tasks. That's interesting because those jobs go from the breaking up into tasks over to the task data store, because you can think of a job as made up of multiple tasks. Let's look at a service tech, and the service tech got broken up into two processes also. The first process being sending a task to the tech. So the sending a task to the tech queries the tasks table. The tasks data store sends task information up to the send task to tech process, and that then sends it to the tech. The tech then posts his time and post materials, which would be on the finish task, which updates the task. Then you can see that the customer inquiry, for instance, the customer has a status request, and he does that through the customer web inquiry system that goes and gets data from jobs, retrieves data from jobs, and sends the data back to the customer. When a job is completed, the generate invoice process happens periodically that would generate an invoice, get a list of completed jobs, and then the invoice would go out to the AR system and the customer. Now, should generate invoice be triggered by something? Should it query tasks and jobs? Potentially. But this is a good stab to start talking to your client about the data flows, and what data we need to record in our system. So let's look at another example of a context diagram and moving it into a level 0 diagram. So I have the context diagram of our ice cream stand with the customer, the bank, the kitchen, and the food supply company that we saw in our previous example. So I'm going to take the system away so that we have our entities and our data flows, our sources, sinks, and our data flows. And then I'm going to work on a fragment, and then work on the next fragment, and then work on the next fragment, and then combine those all into one final diagram. I wasn't expecting the question mark floating directly over my head, but that's the way I am most of the time. Let's look at the customer fragment. We have a customer that places an order. We get a customer that receives an order amount, and we have a customer that makes a payment. Well, those kind of seem to me like three different processes. The customer places an order, and the order then flows to the order data store. We do need a data store for the order, don't we? Would make sense. The calculate the order amount would be a process that would then take that order from the order data store, calculate the amount, and then put the amount back onto the order. So, and it would send that order amount up to the customer. Now, I also say that calculate order amount would send that amount to the receive payment process, so that the receive payment process knows how much to receive from the customer. Could that have gone through the data? Could that have gone through the order data store and a query to query the order? And could there have been lots of other ways to handle this data? And I think the answer would be yes. It just depends upon the business rules. It really takes an analyst to think about the whole thing and all the data and all the processes. This is not just something you sit down and blast out in a matter of a minute or two. This takes a lot of iterative work. And the diagram you're going to see on the next slide, where I've worked through all of the fragments and put them all together, would not be a level 0 diagram that I would actually build a system from. It would be a level 0 diagram that I start to use to communicate with the client, with the developers, and other shareholders, other stakeholders, to try to figure out exactly what's needed. This is a graphical visual teaching tool. So let's look at that level 0 diagram. So the level 0 diagram that I have for the ice cream stand has 7 processes. 1, place order. 2, calculate order. 3, receive payment. Then I've got a process that's not really even anywhere on the context, but bank was on the context with a credit card charge going to the bank and the bank sending it back for approval. And I say that, well, that's a separate process, because we could receive a cash payment and that would go through the payment process, but the debit and credit card wouldn't be involved. So I'm kind of splitting that out as a separate process. Now, maybe that's the case that I should do this at level 0, or maybe I should have done that as a level 1 as I broke up how we process payments. But I just thought it would be a good place to put there. The process 5, where we send the items to the kitchen, and process 6 is where we show the processes are complete. The kitchen item is complete. Notice that when we complete a kitchen item, we remove the items from the inventory data store. So I have an order data store and an inventory data store, so that I can keep an inventory, and when I generate the supply order, it can get a list of items from inventory that it needs and then create the order. So you can see how the fragments all kind of came together into one level 0 diagram that shows kind of the whole system and all of the data flowing and all the different places that the data could be stored. This concludes video 5C, level 0 diagrams. This video is copyright 2020 by James Imrano, PhD. All rights are reserved. I'd also like to say thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in subsequent videos.